All right, folks, welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. And, it's not often. Well, maybe it is often. I don't know how often it is. We hear so much about how people tend to congregate and stay within their own kinds of groups, and parents move to, communities where their ethnicity is shared and whatnot, or at the very other end of that, not the very other end of the spectrum, but in the middle of that spectrum, kind of, as you get towards the other end, is you grow up in a mixed neighborhood, or where there's different kinds of people, different ethnicities sharing the same neighborhood, et cetera. But I guess it's less and less typical, unless I'm wrong, that people, move into an area or grow up where you're almost the only person. For instance, if you're a student, you're the only person in your class who looks like you, and everybody else is different. And that can't be easy for a youngster either. But Jedah Mayberry grew up in a small town in Connecticut, and he looked around his classroom, as they say, and realized that nobody else looked like him. And he joins us right now. Hey, Jedah, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for taking the time. I should point out that you've taken all your experiences, which we'll get to, from that time and through your life, and you put it into a book called The Unheralded King of Preston Plains Middle. You'll explain that title to us in a second. But where in Connecticut did you grow up?
I grew up in the New London area.
Okay, fine, good enough. So you were, when you're talking about, being in your classroom and looking around and nobody looked like you, that's because you were African American in a class filled with white kids, right?
That's pretty much the case, yeah.
Yeah. So at what age were you? I mean, is this all through your elementary school years? And how do you feel? And I would ask a white person the same question. I mean, or an Asian person or anything. How do you feel when everybody else is different at that age?
Well, it was pretty much through my elementary school years, but it really, I think as we advanced in grades and I started taking different classes, that's when I became the only person of color in my particular class. So there were other kids in the school, but the numbers inside the classroom, once I left the playground, I was really the only minority in the group, or the only African-American kid in the class.
Right, so there were a few scattered throughout the school, but you were the only one in your particular classes.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you feel? I mean, do you feel does it wear off? Is there a self-consciousness that lingers forever? And are you treated differently, either on purpose or accidentally?
Well, I think in hindsight, or now looking back from a grown-up's perspective, it gave me a tremendous ability to adapt, to relate to a number of different people. So in the classroom, maybe I had one demeanor. Out on the playground, a slightly different demeanor. And then as I went around in the world and experienced different things, I was prepared to deal with pretty much anyone I encountered. So looking back, I regard it as a strength. As a kid, you kind of take things in stride. So long as nobody was offensive about it, you just kind of deal with it. You recognize the situation and just deal day to day. And
Jedah, what was your family situation? Because that certainly is something you could draw strength from, and I'm guessing you probably did. How old are you right now?
I am 48.
Okay, so we're from the same generation kind of, and things were different. Family structure tended to be stronger, and family tended to be stronger. So did your parents play a central role in helping mold you into the person you turned out to be, and gave you strength that you needed during those trying times?
Yeah, absolutely. My father in particular was just completely unself-conscious. He was from Harlem, grew up in Harlem, but that was just an address. That's where he happened to live. He joined the Navy fairly young, like just out of high school. And again, he was thrust in a circumstance where he encountered all kinds of people. And again, this is, late 50s, early 60s. He's trying to qualify on submarine. And, he's a fish out of water, but he never saw himself that way. And that's, an attribute that I tried to pick up from him.
Now, we should point out to the folks, in addition to writing The Unheralded King of Preston Plains Middle, you hold about 24 patents in technology-related fields. You have your bachelor's degree, and you have your master's degree from Georgia Institute of Technology. So you went on to do quite well for yourself. But interesting, after you left high school, you went kind of in the opposite direction. You went to a traditionally black university, where you found yourself surrounded by everybody who looked like you, correct?
Correct.
And how did that work out? I mean, because to go from one extreme to the other.
Interesting enough, being from Connecticut, I became a different kind of minority. I talked different. I had a different accent than everyone. And again, at that age, I learned to use that, to my advantage. You meet a girl, and I'm the standout guy. I'm the guy that's respected. But that was really sobering, because I then encountered people who I couldn't distinguish by color. I really had to get to know the individual. And let me tell you, I found some great friends there. I had some tremendous disappointments from people who looked just like me. And that was an eye-opening experience. Yeah,
and that's probably an experience that, unless you lived the life you led up to that point, a person who didn't, in other words, a person who goes to a school where it is white or black, where there's plenty of whites and blacks, wouldn't live that experience. Wouldn't say, "Boy, I'm disappointed because maybe the guy who looks like me isn't a good guy." I mean, most kids know that. Kids who look like them are going to be good and going to be bad. They know that from a very young age, but it took you a while to understand that or experience that. Am I correct?
That is correct. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So, okay. So, yeah. I mean, tell me about the title of the book, The Unheralded King of Preston Plains Middle.
So, The Unheralded King of Preston Plains, it's really about brothers. I wanted to explore the relationship between siblings, but brothers in particular. So, this one kid who's deemed the king of his middle school is a little kid. He's out of the ordinary. He's brown in color, but he doesn't participate in things that other kids of color do. He doesn't play football or basketball. He's into martial arts. He wants to compete in the Olympics. His younger brother is following in his shadow and, is trying to fit into fairly large shoes. This is a kid who is deemed the, most prolific fighter in his area, and he loves to fight. Fights for the sport of it more so than out of animosity. So I picked this small little town, not very far from New Orleans, for the sport of it more so than out of animosity. So I picked this small little town, not very far from New Orleans, mostly non-African American kids, but he doesn't associate with African American necessarily. And then when he goes to high school, he's thrust in a circumstance where the balance is a little more mixed.
Yeah. So what you did, I mean, you took a lot from your experience and put it into this book, obviously.
That's right.
Yeah. And do you have brothers and sisters?
I have an older sister.
Yeah. And so she was also how old? Significantly older?
No, just 2 years.
Okay. So was she in the same set of circumstances in her elementary school years as well?
Right, and she found her way out. Mine was mostly through academics, but hers was sports. She played volleyball, she played softball, and that was kind of her niche, her in, and that's how she found a support group or a group of people she could relate to.
Now let me ask you, and this is again, I would have the same conversation with a white student who the situation was the opposite, or an Asian student who was in a mixed school, but there were no Asians. But my question is, and I want to go back to the parenting. That's what's different today, I think. I think a kid who would find himself in that situation or a different situation or a struggling situation, I don't think parents are home as much. I don't think parents are as available. I think the two-parent homes are dwindling away. So do you think you could have become the person that you are? And if you didn't have that family structure, and what advice would you give to youngsters who are going through what you went through or going through any tough time who don't have that family structure to help them through?
Well, we absolutely, my sister and I both had, parents to look to who would come from, again, grew up in Harlem. They drew strength from that, but then they're now in southeastern Connecticut. They're trying to find their way, but they never hung their heads. They never looked down upon themselves. They looked at themselves as fitting in, where they had opportunity to fit in. They joined a bowling league and, made friends in that way. And I would much prefer to see a kid associate with a group of people that he has something in common with than to fall in with a group of people because he looks like that set of people,
right,
and they don't do as well in life. They're not doing things that he or she ought to be doing.
All right. Well, very interesting conversation, and I am certainly glad we had it. Jedah Mayberry and the book, The Unheralded King of Preston Plains Middle. You could get that at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and also Bank Square Books in Mystic, Connecticut, not far from where you grew up, I guess. And I appreciate talking to you, sir. Thank you.
I appreciate the time. Thank you.
All right. My pleasure. All right. There you go.